practical, functional Aikido is fading very fast. And this is because more and more we're finding Aikido being taught and practiced in a way that focuses more on personal development than on practical self-defense. Now, this does not mean that Aikido itself is beyond saving, or that Aikido itself is just by default utterly useless. What it means is that we need a massive reform of the training methodology. And the thing is, this isn't new training methodology. I've talked about this many times before, but it just doesn't seem to be getting through to the right people. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm just bringing back real Aikido. Aikido the way that it was always meant to be taught, the way that it was taught from the beginning, rather than this mutated version that it's become. Now, just because the majority today is doing it in this modified way, that doesn't make that the definition of Aikido. I still think that original Aikido is still real Aikido. So, what are we talking about here? Okay, there's different levels of training and practice in Aikido, okay? And it's really very similar to a lot of other Japanese martial arts, but O-sensei had this kind of innovative take on things, but it unfortunately got misinterpreted and, like I said, mutated into something else. So with most Japanese martial arts, you have kata. You have the solo forms that you practice that help you to develop muscle memory, taijutsu, that's your total body coordination and movement, okay? And the difference is, while kata is normally solo in most other Japanese martial arts, it's normally partnered in Aikido, because practicing kata with another person gives you a more realistic feel for how to apply it. Now, this is the thing that you really have to understand, though. It's still kata. It's still just kata, all right? And kata does not teach you how to fight. It teaches you basics. It teaches you principles. It teaches you how to work your body within the form of the technique. It helps you to develop that muscle memory, right? But it does not give you practical fighting ability. No martial art that practices only kata will ever teach you to fight. Ever. Okay? And most schools today are only doing the kata and confusing it with technique, with applied technique, or GUWazza, which is the second level of training. And GUWazza, that's applied technique. That's more like what you would call bunkai, okay? And bunkai, of course, is, for those that don't know, taking the movements from the kata and then turning them into something that can be applied, okay? So that's usually the part that's done with a partner, which, like I said, in Aikido, kata is partnered, and so we're going up from there. So with GUWazza, often what happens is you focus on a single attack and various ways to defend against that attack, or you'll focus on one defense against different types of attacks. And what this does is it gives you a feel for the plasticity and versatility of techniques. It helps you to develop that instinct to apply the principles of Aikido, that stuff that I keep talking about, in a lot of different dynamic ways. So that's GUWazza. That's the second phase, all right? And this is where you start to develop a little bit of practical ability, but again, it's highly focused. And it's highly focused so that you can develop those techniques and those reactions, you know, those rapid responses, in a very focused manner. So it's still not full-on sparring in most cases. It can be. You can work up to that from GUWazza, but, you know, it's still not necessarily full-on sparring. And then we have this thing called Randori. Now, Randori is another thing that has been mutated into something different than what it was. And I can't speak for all schools. I can't tell you, you know, what's just the absolute end-all be-all of Randori and what isn't. You know, I'm not here to do that, okay? But what I can tell you is just what I personally experienced. So the way that we did Randori is you would have one student in the middle of the mat. You'd have all the other students lined up on the wall. And one person would come in and attack that main student. And when that person hit the ground, then another one was sent in. And when somebody else hit the ground, another and another. Okay? Now, mind you, these people that go to the ground, they aren't staying there on the ground like in some crappy martial arts movie. They aren't being called back to the wall. No, they stay in there and they keep attacking. They get up and they come at you again. So this helps to develop this eye of the storm thing, as I called it, which is what it puts on a lot of pressure. Okay, it's kind of a stress testing situation that helps you to look at the big picture of what's going on in an attack and use the space to your advantage. You know, using ukes as shields against other ukes and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so it also just helps to really develop a lot of that reaction that you need for a real fight because, well, you know, you've got a bunch of people rushing you from all directions. Now, in some cases, you see Randori done with these highly telegraphed, overly committed, completely off-balance attacks. You know, they're obviously just throwing themselves around. It's a mess. It's a disgrace, honestly. And, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, maybe that's fine for those schools that are just focused on, you know, the peace and harmony side of Aikido, but you're not learning practical fighting skills because nobody attacks like that. Okay, the way that we did it, it was just chaos. It was just pure chaos and learning how to find your center within that chaos, which is why I think it was one of the most valuable things that I got from my training, was that particular type of Randori. And I don't know how many other people are doing it, but, you know, if your school does that, leave a comment. And, you know, if you can, ask permission to get some video of that, because we really need to show people that this kind of thing exists, okay? So anyway, that's just another level of GUWazza. That's just another type, okay? So with the regular one uke GUWazza, you're learning the plasticity and dynamicness of techniques. And then with Randori, you're learning how to express those techniques within the maelstrom of just all-out chaotic attack from all directions, okay? And of course, how to use your space and how to use your body movement. You're getting a lot more of the taijutsu out of that. And so then, of course, there's actual sparring, which a lot of Aikido schools just don't do anymore. They need to. If you want to learn how to fight, you have to practice fighting. You have to have real sparring with real resistance. You can gradually increase the resistance as you go along, as you get more comfortable with it, but you do have to practice with resistance. And then the last phase of it is what I've mentioned a couple times before, GUWazza. GUWazza is the coarse techniques or rough techniques. Basically, it's the stuff that's designed to really do damage, okay? And so the focus here is to knock someone out or to temporarily or permanently cripple them, you know, to break a limb, something like that. Total neutralization of the threat, okay? A lot of times they say that Aikido is about doing the least damage possible. Well, yes and no. It's about doing the least damage necessary. But oftentimes in a real attack, what's necessary is to completely take them out. And that's just the reality of violence. And you've got to get used to that. You have to wrap your mind around that. And after you've had a good bit of training and you've learned how to take proper ukemi and all the necessary components to building up to this more rough style of Aikido, you can then do that and do it, relatively safely with other students who know what they're doing. But again, you have to actually get there. And so the problem that I'm seeing is that people are taking the kata of Aikido and thinking that it's the technique of Aikido. They are only practicing the kata part of it and imagining that they're learning real fighting, and you're not. And there are so-called black belts out there. There are so-called instructors out there who are still doing this purely basic, all kata form of Aikido, and then they get disappointed when they find out that they don't actually know how to fight. Or their students start leaving when they get in a situation where they need to defend themselves and they find themselves completely unprepared, and that all of the stuff that they've learned in class just didn't avail them. Well, that's because they aren't learning to deal with chaos. They aren't learning to deal with real violence. They aren't being taught the mentality of violence. They aren't being taught basic self-defense stuff like being aware of your surroundings, looking for signs of a potential threat. They're not being taught just fundamental things. Fundamental things which, by the way, all of O-sensei's original students would have already known because they already came from other martial backgrounds. So all of these things are part of traditional Aikido. Everything that I've described here is part of traditional Aikido. It's not new Aikido. It's not something that I just made up. It's Aikido as it was always meant to be. And, one more point before I go. There's two sides to Aikido, by the way. The uke and the nage, or, whatever you call them, tori, shite, I see all these other words for it. Anyway, the uke, the receiver of technique, they're the ones that are usually doing the initial attack, right? That initial attack is also part of Aikido. The ukemi, the, taking the falls, taking the rolls, all that kind of stuff, that is also part of Aikido. So you're learning, or you should be learning, how to minimize damage to yourself should you be thrown around. And you also should be learning how to deliver proper strikes, which is, the reason for my GUWazza series. So that's just another thing to bear in mind is when you're the uke, you should still be learning something practical and useful. And that teaching should go a bit more in depth besides how to pretend to hit somebody and then throw yourself. Okay, so that's probably all the time that I've got. Thanks for watching. I'll link my Patreon if you want to support my work. And, like, comment, share, all that good stuff. See you around.